The audience was already leaning forward in their seats when it happened. What started as a routine daytime interview suddenly shifted into something far more uncomfortable, and no one in the studio seemed quite prepared for it. A simple question from Joy Behar hung in the air, and Brad Pitt's reaction? Let's just say it stopped the entire room cold. Quick heads up, subscribe to Backstory Uncovered, because what starts as a normal conversation here is about to take a turn no one expected. The segment had begun like any other. Brad Pitt sat comfortably across the table, relaxed but attentive, promoting his latest project. The audience had welcomed him with loud applause, and Joy Behar opened with the usual light talk show energy. "So Brad," Joy said with a small smile, leaning slightly toward him, "you've had one of the most fascinating careers in Hollywood. But people are just as interested in the headlines around your life as they are your movies." Brad nodded politely. "That tends to happen." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Joy continued, her tone casual but pointed. "You've been in the spotlight for decades now. Does it ever frustrate you that sometimes the personal stories seem to overshadow the work?" Brad paused for a moment, considering the question. "It comes with the territory," he replied calmly. "You sign up for a certain level of attention when you do this job." "So you're okay with it?" Joy asked quickly. "Well," Brad said, leaning back slightly, "I wouldn't say I'm okay with everything that comes with it." The audience murmured softly. Joy tilted her head. "Because some people would argue you've benefited from that attention too." Brad raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" Joy didn't hesitate. "The publicity, the mystique, the relationships. Hollywood has always been fascinated with your personal life." A few audience members shifted in their seats. Brad gave a small, controlled smile. "I think Hollywood has always been fascinated with stories in general." Joy pressed on. "Sure. But sometimes it feels like those stories get bigger than the truth, right?" Brad nodded once. "Exactly." Joy leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening just a bit. "But at the same time," she said, "you can't deny that some of those stories came directly from choices you made." A subtle tension spread across the studio. Brad's smile faded. "Everyone makes choices," he said carefully. Joy shrugged. "Of course. But when you're one of the most famous people on the planet, those choices become public conversation." A few audience members clapped lightly, unsure whether they were agreeing or just reacting to the moment. Brad folded his hands on the table. "And sometimes," he said slowly, "those conversations are built on assumptions." Joy leaned back slightly. "You think the media gets it wrong?" Brad let out a small breath. "I think the media often fills in gaps with whatever makes the best headline." The audience reacted with a mix of laughter and quiet applause. Joy smiled again, but there was a hint of challenge in it. "Well," she said, "you have to admit, when someone lives a life as visible as yours, people are going to have opinions." Brad nodded. "Opinions are fine," he replied. "But there's a difference between opinions and narratives." That line made the audience noticeably quieter. Joy tapped her pen lightly on the table. "Are you saying there's been a narrative about you that isn't fair?" Brad hesitated. For the first time since the interview began, he looked directly at Joy instead of the audience. "I'm saying," he replied calmly, "that sometimes the loudest stories aren't the most accurate ones." The audience reacted with a louder murmur now. Joy crossed her arms lightly. "But you can't blame people for reacting to what they see, Brad." Brad's jaw tightened slightly. "And what exactly do they see?" he asked. The question lingered in the air. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but paused for a split second. That pause was enough for the audience to feel the shift. The energy in the studio had completely changed. Joy cleared her throat. "Well, they see headlines, interviews, public moments." Brad nodded slowly. "Right," he said. "Public moments." There was another short silence. Then Brad leaned forward slightly. "And sometimes," he added quietly, "those moments don't tell the full story." The audience erupted into scattered applause. Joy smiled again, but this time it looked more cautious. "All right," she said. "So let's talk about the story you think people missed." Brad held her gaze. And that's when the conversation truly started to heat up. The applause faded, but the tension in the room didn't. Everyone could feel it now. The interview had shifted from casual promotion to something much more personal. Brad Pitt was still leaning slightly forward, hands folded on the table, while Joy Behar watched him carefully, as if deciding how far she wanted to push the conversation. Joy let out a small breath and nodded. "All right," she said, her tone measured. "You mentioned that sometimes the story people see isn't the full one. So what part do you think people misunderstand the most?" Brad didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the audience, then back at Joy. "Well," he said calmly, "for starters, people assume they know motivations." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Motivations?" "Yeah," Brad replied. "Why someone did something. What they were thinking. What kind of person they must be because of it." A few audience members nodded. Joy tapped the table lightly. "But when you're a public figure, that kind of speculation is almost inevitable." Brad shrugged slightly. "Speculation is one thing. Certainty is another." The audience reacted with quiet murmurs. Joy leaned forward again. "So you're saying people have been certain about things they actually don't know?" Brad gave a small nod. "That happens a lot." Joy didn't back off. "But Brad, let's be honest for a moment. When someone lives such a visible life, relationships, headlines, public appearances, it creates a picture whether you like it or not." Brad tilted his head slightly. "A picture painted by who?" The audience gave a soft, "Oh." Joy smiled faintly. "By the media, by fans, by what people observe." Brad shook his head slowly. "That's exactly the point," he said. "Observation isn't the same as understanding." A few people in the audience clapped. Joy's expression tightened just a bit. But sometimes silence from celebrities allows those narratives to grow. Brad leaned back in his chair. "You know what's interesting about that?" he replied. "When you speak up, people say you're controlling the narrative. When you stay quiet, they say you're hiding something." The audience laughed and applauded. Joy paused, clearly aware the room was reacting strongly to Brad's answers. "Well," she said with a half-smile, "welcome to fame." Brad chuckled softly. "I've been here a while." More laughter broke out. But Joy quickly steered things back. "Still," she said, her voice sharpening again, "there are moments where the public feels they deserve clarity. Especially when something becomes a cultural conversation." Brad's eyes narrowed slightly. "Deserve," he repeated. Joy nodded. "When someone is a global figure, people feel connected to their story." Brad looked down for a moment, then back up. "And that connection can turn into entitlement pretty fast." The audience reacted with louder murmurs. Joy blinked, slightly surprised by the directness. "Entitlement?" Brad didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said calmly. "The idea that someone's entire life should be open for interpretation just because they make movies." A wave of applause rolled through the audience. Joy raised both hands slightly, trying to regain control of the moment. All right," she said, laughing lightly. "I didn't expect to get called out today." The crowd laughed. Brad smiled politely. "I'm not calling you out." Joy looked at him skeptically. "Really?" Brad nodded. "I'm just saying, conversations like this sometimes assume the public already has the full picture." Joy leaned back, thinking for a moment. "So what would you want people to understand that they don't?" For the first time during the interview, Brad's voice softened. "That real life is a lot more complicated than headlines," he said. The room grew quiet. "People grow," he continued. "They make mistakes. They learn. But the public version of you gets frozen in whatever moment made the biggest splash." Several audience members nodded quietly. Joy studied him for a moment before speaking again. "That's actually a fair point." A small ripple of applause spread through the audience. Brad smiled slightly, the tension easing just a bit. Joy adjusted the papers in front of her and sighed. "You know," she said, "I think this might be the first time today where the interview has turned into us getting interviewed." The audience laughed loudly. Brad shrugged with a grin. "It happens." Joy looked toward the crowd, then back at him. "Well, whether people agree with you or not," she said, "you definitely gave them something to think about." The audience clapped again, louder this time. Brad nodded respectfully. "And that's really all anyone can ask for." Joy smiled. "All right, Brad Pitt," leaving us all a little quieter than we started. The crowd laughed and applauded as the tension finally broke. But the moment lingered, the kind of unexpected exchange that turns a normal talk show segment into something people keep replaying online. So what do you think? Was Brad Pitt right to push back, or was Joy Behar just asking the questions everyone else was thinking? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Backstory Uncovered for more behind-the-scenes stories for moments just like this.